The morning sun peeked through the thin curtains of a small apartment on the east side of the city. Lisa Mitchell squinted as the light hit her eyes, then reached over to silence her alarm. It was 5:30 a.m., another early start to another long day. Unlike most people who drag themselves out of bed at this hour, Lisa moved with purpose. Her fingers stretched and flexed automatically as she made her coffee, a habit from years of training that her body wouldn't let go of even now. Scales first, then the Chopin piece, she whispered to herself while waiting for the water to boil. There was no one to hear her, but speaking the words aloud had become part of her ritual, a promise to herself that she renewed each morning. The small digital keyboard sat in the corner of her living room, positioned to take up as little space as possible in the cramped apartment. It was nothing like the magnificent grand pianos she had once played, but it was all she could afford now. The keyboard stood as both a reminder of what she had lost and what she still hoped to achieve. Lisa sat down and placed her fingers on the keys, closing her eyes as she began to play. She had turned the volume down so low that only she could hear the notes, mindful of her neighbors who might still be sleeping. But in her mind, she was performing in a concert hall, the sound rich and full, filling every corner of an imaginary auditorium. For 45 minutes, she lost herself in the music, her fingers dancing across the keys with a grace and precision that would have stunned anyone watching. But no one was watching. No one had watched her play in nearly 3 years. Not since she had walked away from Westridge Conservatory with a degree in piano performance and mounting student debt. The timer on her phone chimed, pulling her back to reality. Time to get ready for work. Another day, another dollar, she sighed, echoing her dad's favorite saying. She showered quickly and put on the crisp white shirt and black pants that made up her uniform at the Silver Spoon, one of the city's most exclusive restaurants. The restaurant was a different world from her tiny apartment, all polished marble, crystal chandeliers, and guests who thought nothing of spending more on a single meal than Lisa made in a week. She had been working there for almost 2 years now, taking as many shifts as they would give her, saving every tip, and slowly chipping away at her mountain of debt. "Morning, sunshine," called out Raj, the head chef, as Lisa entered through the staff door. He was already busy prepping for lunch service, his hands moving with the same kind of practiced precision that Lisa's did when she played piano. "Hey, Raj, need any help setting up?" Lisa tucked her bag into her assigned locker and grabbed an apron. "Nah, I'm good. But Diane was looking for you. Something about a big event coming up." Lisa nodded and went to find the restaurant manager. Diane was in her office, surrounded by stacks of paperwork and looking more stressed than usual. "You wanted to see me?" Lisa asked, knocking lightly on the open door. Diane looked up, relief washing over her face. "Yes, thank you for coming in early. We just got confirmation for a charity gala next Friday night. Very high profile. The governor will be there, some celebrities, lots of potential for good tips." She shuffled through some papers. "I need my best staff on this, and you're always reliable. Can you work it?" Lisa quickly calculated in her head. Another big event meant more money, and more money meant getting closer to her goal. "Absolutely. Great, it's black tie, so extra polish on everything. The client is very particular." Diane handed her a folder. "Here's the schedule and menu. They're bringing in some entertainment, but I'll need you to help the coordinator when they arrive for setup." As Lisa flipped through the event details, her eyes caught on a line in the program. "Evening entertainment, Philharmonic String Quartet and featured pianist." Her heart did a little stutter. It had been so long since she'd heard live classical music. Part of her had deliberately avoided concerts and performances. It hurt too much to watch others living the life she had planned for herself. But this time there would be no avoiding it. She would be right there, serving drinks and clearing plates while someone else made music. "Everything okay?" Diane asked, noticing her hesitation. Lisa closed the folder quickly. "Yes, everything's fine. I'll be there." The rest of the day passed in the usual rhythm of lunch service. Lisa moved between tables with practiced ease, remembering every order, anticipating needs before guests even realized they had them. She had learned to read people well, which tables wanted attentive service and which preferred to be left alone, which guests were celebrating and which were conducting business. "Table 7 is asking for you specifically," Raj told her during a brief lull. "The older gentleman says you served him last month and remembered exactly how he likes his steak." Lisa smiled. It was these small victories that made the job bearable, the moments when her attention to detail was appreciated. She headed to table 7, where a well-dressed older man sat with what appeared to be his family. "It's wonderful to see you again, sir," she said warmly. "Medium rare with extra mushrooms, if I remember correctly." The man beamed at his companions. "See, what did I tell you? Best service in the city right here." As Lisa took their orders, she noticed a program for the city symphony on the table. The man saw her glance. "Just came from a morning concert," he explained. "My daughter plays cello with the symphony. We're celebrating her first season as a principal player." "Congratulations," Lisa said to the young woman, ignoring the pang in her chest. "That's quite an accomplishment." The cellist smiled. "Thank you. It's been a long journey." "Are you interested in classical music?" the man asked Lisa. For a moment, Lisa considered telling them the truth about her training, her dreams, the path not taken. But what was the point? She was their server, not their peer. They hadn't come here to hear her life story. "I enjoy it," she said simply. "I'll put your orders in right away." Back in the kitchen, Lisa leaned against the wall for a moment, taking a deep breath. Sometimes it hit her harder than others. This parallel life she wasn't living, the what-ifs that followed her around like shadows. "You good?" Raj asked, noticing her expression. "Yeah," she said, straightening up. "Just a little tired." After her shift ended, Lisa declined an invitation from co-workers to grab drinks. Instead, she took a detour on her way home, walking past Westridge Hall where she had once performed her graduate recital. The building was lit up for an evening concert, people in nice clothes filing in through the main doors. She stood across the street, watching. In another life, they might have been coming to hear her play. In another life, her name might have been on the posters. A street musician had set up nearby, playing jazz standards on a saxophone. The music floated through the evening air, intermingling with the sound of traffic and conversations. Lisa dropped a $5 bill in his case, more than she could really afford. But there was a kind of solidarity there that she couldn't ignore. Back at her apartment, Lisa heated up leftover pasta and sat at her tiny kitchen table with her laptop. She opened her budget spreadsheet, a meticulous record of every dollar earned and spent. At the bottom was a goal: $15,000 for a proper piano and enough savings to take 6 months off to practice and audition again. The number seemed impossible sometimes, like trying to climb a mountain with a teaspoon. But tonight, after adding in her tips from the day, she was $87 closer than she had been yesterday. Before bed, she returned to her keyboard for another hour of practice. This time, she worked on a piece she had been composing bit by bit, a melody that had been haunting her for months. It wasn't quite right yet, but it was getting closer. As she played the final notes, her phone buzzed with a text from Diane. "Can you come in an hour early tomorrow? Need to discuss details for the gala." Lisa typed back a quick yes, then turned off her keyboard. As she got ready for bed, she caught herself humming the melody from the cellist's symphony program. Music had a way of staying with you, even when you tried to leave it behind. Tomorrow would be another early morning, another day of serving others. But for those precious moments at her keyboard, Lisa had been herself again, not a waitress, but a musician. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough to keep the dream alive for one more day. The week leading up to the charity gala flew by in a blur of preparation. Lisa arrived at the Silver Spoon an hour before her usual time each day to help with the extra tasks. The entire staff felt the pressure. This wasn't just another fancy dinner, but a showcase event that could cement the restaurant's reputation among the city's elite. "We need everything perfect," Diane reminded them during the staff meeting. "The guest list includes the governor, 3 state senators, the symphony director, and at least a dozen CEOs. She flipped through her clipboard. "And apparently some surprise celebrity guests the organizer won't even tell me about." Lisa listened while polishing silverware, wondering how many of these important people had attended concerts at Westridge Hall. Had any of them ever applauded for her during her student recitals? Would they have become her patrons in that other life she sometimes still dreamed about? "Lisa, are you with us?" Diane's voice cut through her thoughts. "Yes, sorry. Just making sure these forks are spotless," she replied, holding one up to the light. Diane nodded approvingly. "That's why you're on the VIP tables. Your attention to detail is exactly what we need." The compliment should have made her happy, but Lisa felt a familiar hollow ache. Attention to detail, the same quality her piano professors had praised before everything fell apart. Now she used it to arrange place settings instead of musical notes. On Thursday, the day before the gala, Lisa was helping set up the private dining room when she overheard a heated conversation from Diane's office. "What do you mean he's in the hospital?" Diane's voice was strained. "The gala is tomorrow night." Lisa slowed her work, ears perked. "A pianist isn't something we can just replace at the last minute," Diane continued. "This is a formal charity event with a printed program, not open mic night at a coffee shop." A knot formed in Lisa's stomach. She moved closer to the office door, pretending to arrange flowers on a nearby table. "Well, can any of your quartet members play piano too?" Diane asked, followed by a pause. "I understand, but..." Another pause. "Yes, I realize it's a different instrument entirely." Lisa's heart began to race. She knew she should walk away, mind her own business, continue with her work, but her feet wouldn't move. "The client is going to be furious," Diane said, her voice dropping. "Half the program is built around the piano performance." After a moment of silence, she added, "Fine, I'll try to figure something out." "But you owe me big time, Anthony." When Diane hung up the phone, she let out a long sigh that Lisa could hear from the hallway. Then came the sound of furious typing, probably sending urgent emails or making calls to find a replacement. Lisa stood frozen, a battle raging inside her. This was it, the moment she'd been both waiting for and dreading. An opportunity to play again, to be seen for what she truly was, but also a risk. What if she failed? What if years of playing on a cheap keyboard had dulled her skills too much? What if she made a fool of herself in front of all those important people? "Do you need help with those flowers?" Raj appeared beside her, making her jump. "Oh, no, She glanced toward Diane's office. "Did you hear that? Their pianist canceled." Raj raised an eyebrow. "Yeah, and?" "Not our problem. We just provide the food and service." "But..." Lisa hesitated, then lowered her voice. "I could do it." Raj stared at her. "Do what?" "Play the piano." "For the gala." His eyes widened. "You play piano? Like professionally?" "I used to," she admitted. "I have a degree from Westridge Conservatory. I was going to be a concert pianist before." She gestured vaguely, not wanting to get into her financial troubles. Raj studied her face. "You're serious." "Completely." "Then why are you telling me instead of Diane?" Lisa glanced at the office door again. "Because I'm scared. I haven't performed in public for 3 years. What if I'm not good enough anymore?" Raj crossed his arms. "Let me get this straight. You've been working double shifts and overtime at this place for what, 2 years? Carrying plates and smiling at rich people who don't even look at you? And all this time you could have been playing piano at Carnegie Hall or whatever." "It's not that simple," Lisa protested. "It never is," Raj agreed. "But right now it kind of is. Diane needs a pianist. You are a pianist. Go tell her before she has a breakdown or calls in some mediocre replacement." Lisa took a deep breath. "Okay, I'll do it." Raj grinned and gave her a gentle push toward the office. "That's my girl. Go get him." Lisa knocked on Diane's door, her knuckles barely making a sound. She cleared her throat and tried again, louder this time. "Come in," Diane called, distraction evident in her voice. Lisa entered the office, clasping her hands to hide their trembling. "I couldn't help but overhear about the pianist problem." Diane looked up from her computer, eyes tired. "Eavesdropping, were we? Sorry, I was arranging flowers, but I might be able to help." "Unless you have a concert pianist in your pocket, I doubt it," Diane said, returning to her screen. "Actually," Lisa took another deep breath, "I am one, or I was. I have a degree in piano performance from Westridge Conservatory." Diane's fingers froze over the keyboard. She looked up slowly, disbelief written across her face. "You're joking." "No, I graduated 3 years ago. I was training to be a concert pianist." "And you're working here as a waitress because..." Lisa shifted uncomfortably. "Student loans, family medical bills, life, but I still practice every day." Diane leaned back in her chair, studying Lisa as if seeing her for the first time. "Why haven't you ever mentioned this?" "It wasn't relevant to serving food," Lisa said simply. "And it's painful to talk about." For a long moment, Diane said nothing. Then she stood up. "Come with me." She led Lisa to the small piano in the corner of the main dining room, an elegant baby grand used mainly for ambient background music during regular dinner service. It was kept more as decoration than anything else. The restaurant usually hired a pianist only for special occasions. Play something, Diane said. Show me what you can do. Lisa glanced around. The restaurant was mostly empty, with just a few early diners seated far from the piano. Still, her palms began to sweat. Public performance, even this informal, was something she hadn't done in years. She sat down at the bench, adjusting it to the proper height. The keys were cool beneath her fingers as she positioned her hands. For a moment, she couldn't think of what to play. Her mind went completely blank. Then, almost without conscious thought, her fingers began to move. Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major, the piece she had played at her very first recital as a child. The melody came back to her like an old friend, familiar and comforting. She forgot about Diane standing behind her. Forgot about the few customers who had paused their conversations to listen. Forgot about everything except the music flowing from her fingers, filling the restaurant with something beyond mere notes, a story of longing, of beauty found in darkness, of hope. When she finished, there was a moment of perfect silence, then applause. Lisa turned to see not just Diane, but the entire kitchen staff standing in the doorway. Raj was grinning from ear to ear. A couple at a nearby table were on their feet, clapping enthusiastically. Well, Diane said, her businesslike tone not quite hiding her amazement, I think we found our pianist. The next 24 hours passed in a whirlwind. Lisa called in a favor from her neighbor Carol, who worked at a local theater, to borrow a formal gown. A simple but elegant black dress that fit well enough with a few safety pins. She spent her lunch break running through the program Diane had given her, familiar classical pieces that she had performed many times before. Are you sure about this? Diane asked her that evening as they reviewed the schedule. Once I tell the event coordinator there's no backing out. Lisa nodded, though her stomach was in knots. I'm sure. That night she barely slept. She practiced until her fingers ached, then lay awake replaying the music in her head. By morning, dark circles shadowed her eyes, but there was a spark there too, a light that had been missing for a long time. When she arrived at the restaurant the next day, everything was transformed. The main dining room gleamed with additional chandeliers. White roses and lilies filled crystal vases at each table. The string quartet was setting up in the corner, tuning their instruments. Lisa approached them nervously. Hi, I'm Lisa Mitchell. I'll be filling in as the pianist tonight. The violinist, a woman with silver-streaked hair pulled into a tight bun, looked her up and down. Anthony mentioned something about a last-minute replacement. Have you reviewed the program? Yes, Lisa assured her. I'm familiar with all the pieces. We'll need to rehearse the joint number, the cellist said. Whenever you're ready. For the next hour, Lisa worked with the quartet, finding her rhythm with them, adjusting to their tempo and style. By the end, even the stern-faced violinist seemed satisfied. Not bad for a waitress, she remarked, which Lisa decided to take as a compliment. As the afternoon wore on, Lisa alternated between helping with final preparations and practicing in a small office Diane had cleared for her. The borrowed dress hung on the back of the door, a visual reminder of what was to come. At 6 o'clock, the staff gathered for final instructions. Lisa stood awkwardly to the side, caught between two worlds, not quite staff tonight, but not quite performer either. Remember, these are some of the most influential people in the city, Diane told them. Every detail matters. She turned to Lisa. And you? Don't think about anything except the music. We'll handle the rest. As the first guests began to arrive, Lisa slipped away to change. Her hands trembled as she pinned up her hair and applied a touch of lipstick. The woman in the mirror looked both familiar and strange, the ghost of a future she had once taken for granted. A knock came at the door. 10 minutes, Raj called. They're finishing appetizers. Thank you, Lisa replied, her voice barely audible. She took one last look in the mirror. You can do this, she whispered to herself. Just remember why you fell in love with music in the first place. With that, she opened the door and stepped into the hallway, ready to reclaim the part of herself she had kept hidden for too long. The borrowed black dress felt foreign against Lisa's skin as she made her way through the back hallway of the Silver Spoon. The safety pins Carol had used to adjust the fit poked slightly into her side, a small discomfort that somehow grounded her in the midst of her racing thoughts. From the dining room came the gentle hum of conversation, the clink of silverware against fine china, and occasional bursts of polite laughter. These were sounds Lisa knew well from her position as a waitress, But tonight she wasn't there to serve. She paused at the edge of the hallway, peering around the corner. The dining room had been transformed. Soft golden light from the chandeliers cast a warm glow over tables draped in crisp white linens. Centerpieces of orchids and candles created islands of elegance among the sea of well-dressed guests. In the corner, the string quartet was already set up, their instruments gleaming. And there, in the center of it all, stood the piano. Not the usual baby grand from the restaurant, but a full concert grand that had been brought in specially for the event. Its polished black surface reflected the chandelier lights like a mirror. Lisa's heart hammered against her ribs. That piano was waiting for her. There you are. Diane appeared beside her, clipboard in hand. The governor just arrived, and people are nearly finished with their main course. The quartet will play one piece, then introduce you. Lisa nodded, not trusting herself to speak. Diane studied her face. Are you going to be sick? Because if you are, please do it now and not on the Steinway. That thing costs more than I make in a year. The blunt comment surprised a laugh out of Lisa. I'm not going to be sick, just nervous. Good. Nervous means you care. Diane squeezed her arm. You look beautiful, by the way. Very professional. Before Lisa could respond, Raj hurried over, still wearing his chef's coat. Kitchen's under control, he said. I came to wish our secret weapon good luck. He gave Lisa a quick hug. Knock 'em dead, piano girl. Lisa felt a rush of gratitude for these people who had only known her as a waitress but were now supporting her as a musician. Thank you both, really. Don't thank us yet, Diane said, checking her watch. Thank us when this is over and we've pulled off a miracle. She nodded toward the dining room. It's time. The quartet is starting. The first strains of Mozart filled the air as Lisa took a deep breath and followed Diane to a small table that had been set aside for her. From here she could see the entire room while remaining somewhat inconspicuous until her moment came. Lisa scanned the crowd, recognizing some faces from her time serving at the restaurant. The governor sat at the center table, deep in conversation with a woman Lisa recognized as the city's arts commissioner. Near them was the owner of the largest real estate development company in the state. At another table sat the symphony director with what appeared to be major donors. These were people who could change her life with a single phone call, a single opportunity. People who normally looked past her as she refilled their water glasses. Tonight they would be looking directly at her. The thought sent a fresh wave of panic through her body. What if she failed? What if 3 years of practicing on a digital keyboard hadn't been enough? What if her fingers froze or she forgot the music? As if sensing her rising anxiety, one of the servers, Tina, who had started at the restaurant around the same time as Lisa, appeared with a glass of water. Thought you might need this, she whispered, setting it down. We're all rooting for you. Lisa gave her a grateful smile and took a sip, trying to steady her shaking hands. The cool water helped clear her mind, bringing her back to the present moment. The quartet finished their piece to enthusiastic applause. The lead violinist stood and addressed the crowd. Thank you all for your generous support of the Children's Music Education Initiative tonight. We have a special treat for you now. Due to an unexpected change in our program, we're delighted to introduce a remarkable young pianist who will be performing several classical favorites. Please welcome Lisa Mitchell. The polite applause that followed felt distant, as if it were happening in another room. Lisa rose from her seat, suddenly aware of every eye in the place turning toward her. The short walk to the piano seemed to stretch for miles. When she finally reached the bench, she adjusted it with hands that didn't quite feel like her own. The keys before her, ivory and ebony, familiar yet intimidating, waited for her touch. She closed her eyes for a moment, remembering her tiny apartment, her digital keyboard with the volume turned down low. Remembering the dreams she'd set aside but never abandoned. Remembering why she played in the first place, not for applause or recognition, but because music was the truest language she knew. When she opened her eyes again, the room had fallen silent in anticipation. Lisa placed her hands on the keys and began to play. The first notes of Debussy's Clair de Lune floated into the air, tentative at first, like a question. The piano responded to her touch with a richness her keyboard at home could never replicate. Each note rang true and clear, filling the space with moonlight and memory. As she played, something shifted inside her. The nervousness didn't disappear, but it transformed, becoming energy that flowed through her fingers into the music. She leaned into the familiar curves of the melody, letting it carry her forward. By the time she reached the climax of the piece, Lisa had forgotten about the safety pins in her borrowed dress, forgotten about the important people watching, forgotten about everything except the conversation between her hands and the piano, a dialogue 3 years interrupted but never truly ended. When the final notes faded, there was a moment of complete silence. Lisa remained still, hands hovering above the keys, afraid to break the spell. Then came the applause, not the polite, obligatory kind, but genuine and enthusiastic. Lisa stood and turned to face the room, offering a small bow as her mother had taught her to do after performances. The faces looking back at her showed surprise, appreciation, and something else, a recognition that hadn't been there before. She returned to the piano for her second piece, a Chopin nocturne that had always been one of her favorites. This time she began with confidence, letting the music tell its story through her. The nervous energy had transformed into something electric, a current running between her, the piano, and the audience. From the corner of her eye, she could see some of her co-workers watching from the edges of the room. Raj had come out from the kitchen, still in his chef's coat, beaming with pride. Tina was recording on her phone. Even the usually unimpressed bartender had stopped mixing drinks to listen. As she moved through her program, Lisa felt something long dormant awakening inside her. This wasn't just about tonight or this audience. This was about reclaiming a part of herself she had tucked away, believing it was a luxury she couldn't afford. Between pieces, the symphony director leaned over to whisper something to the arts commissioner. A well-known music critic who happened to be in attendance was making notes on his phone. The governor's wife had stopped eating entirely, her fork suspended mid-air as she listened. For the final piece of her solo set, Lisa had chosen Rachmaninoff's Prelude in G minor, a challenging work that showcased technical skill and emotional depth. As she launched into the dramatic opening chords, she felt a surge of adrenaline. This was the piece she had played at her final recital at Westridge, the piece that had earned her a standing ovation from her professors. Her fingers flew across the keys, finding the complex patterns without hesitation. Years of daily practice, even on her inadequate keyboard, had kept the music in her muscle memory. The powerful bass notes resonated through the room, creating a foundation for the melody that soared above. When she struck the final chord, the response was immediate. People rose to their feet, applauding with genuine enthusiasm. The symphony director was nodding appreciatively. The governor was smiling broadly, but it was the faces of her co-workers that moved Lisa the most. Diane, usually so composed, was wiping a tear from the corner of her eye. Raj was clapping so hard it looked like it hurt. They had seen her, really seen her, for the first time. After a brief intermission, during which Lisa tried to catch her breath in the back hallway, she returned to join the string quartet for their collaborative pieces. What had been a hastily arranged partnership that afternoon now felt natural, as if they had been playing together for years. The 5 musicians breathed as one, following each other through the nuances of tempo and dynamics. As the final notes of their last piece together faded away, Lisa felt a curious mixture of exhaustion and exhilaration. Her fingers were tired, her back ached from maintaining proper posture, and yet she felt more alive than she had in years. The audience stood once more, their applause washing over her like a wave. The quartet members nodded to her with newfound respect. The lead violinist, who had seemed so skeptical earlier, leaned over and whispered, "Extraordinary playing. Where have you been hiding?" Lisa didn't know how to answer that question. How could she explain the complex web of circumstances that had led her from the concert stage to serving tables? How could she describe the daily struggle to keep her dream alive in the early morning hours before work? So instead, she simply smiled and whispered back, "Thank you." As she made her way back to the small room where she had changed, Lisa felt lighter somehow. Whatever happened next, whether this night led to new opportunities or simply remained a beautiful memory, she had proven something to herself. The musician she had trained to become was still there, waiting patiently beneath the surface of the person life had forced her to be. Lisa had barely made it back to the small office to catch her breath when there was a knock at the door. She opened it to find Diane looking both stunned and delighted. "You have visitors," Diane said, her voice unusually gentle. "Important ones." Take a minute if you need it, then come out to the main dining room. Lisa nodded, her heart still racing from the performance. She turned to the small mirror on the wall, checking her appearance. Her cheeks were flushed and her eyes were bright with the lingering excitement of playing. She took a deep breath, smoothed the borrowed dress, and stepped out into the hallway. The dining room had transformed again. Where before there had been formal dining, now small groups stood chatting, drinks in hand. The atmosphere had shifted from the ceremonial politeness of a charity dinner to the buzzing energy of a reception. At the center of it all was the piano, standing like a black island in a sea of movement. As Lisa entered, she noticed several people turn to look at her. Not with the casual glance they might give a waitress bringing water, but with focused interest. She felt suddenly exposed, as if she had accidentally stepped onto a stage during someone else's performance. "There she is," came a voice to her left. Lisa turned to see the symphony director approaching, accompanied by the silver-haired violinist from the quartet, and an older man she didn't recognize. "Miss Mitchell," the director said, extending his hand. "Richard Wilson, director of the City Symphony. Your playing tonight was remarkable, especially considering the circumstances. Where did you train?" The question, so simple and yet so loaded with meaning, momentarily froze Lisa in place. How long had it been since anyone had asked about her musical background? How long since anyone had seen her as a musician first? "Westridge Conservatory," she managed to say. "I graduated 3 years ago." The older man beside the director raised his eyebrows. "Westridge? I'm on the board there. Who was your professor?" "Dr. Chen for my undergraduate work, then Dr. Abramson for my master's," Lisa replied, finding her voice more easily now. Recognition flickered in the man's eyes. "Abramson doesn't take many students. He must have seen something special in you." He held out his hand. "Thomas Grant, I sponsored the piano fellowship at Westridge." Lisa's heart skipped. The Grant Fellowship, the position she had dreamed of securing after graduation before her mother's illness had derailed everything. This man had funded the very opportunity she had been forced to abandon. "It's an honor to meet you, sir," she said, shaking his hand. "The honor is mine. I don't believe I've ever been served dinner by a pianist of your caliber before." His tone was light, but his eyes were serious. "Though I must say it seems a tragic waste of talent." Before Lisa could respond, a woman in an elegant blue dress joined their circle. "Excuse me," she said, "but I simply had to tell you how moved I was by your performance. I'm Patricia Winters with the Arts Commission." More people gathered around, the owner of a local music school, a wealthy donor to the arts, a music critic for the city paper. Each had questions, compliments, curious glances. Lisa answered as best she could, trying to navigate this sudden attention while still processing the fact that she had just performed for the first time in 3 years. From across the room, she caught sight of Raj watching, giving her an encouraging thumbs up. Tina and 2 other servers were huddled nearby, clearly talking about her. And by the entrance stood the restaurant owner, Mr. Phillips, deep in conversation with Diane, both occasionally glancing her way. "If you'll excuse me," the symphony director said to the group, "I'd like a private word with Miss Mitchell." He guided Lisa toward a quieter corner of the room. "I'll be direct," he said once they were somewhat alone. "We have a pianist leaving for New York next month. We'll be holding auditions for a replacement to perform with us for our summer series. Based on what I heard tonight, I'd like you to consider applying." Lisa stared at him, wondering if she had misheard. "You want me to audition? For the symphony?" "Yes, it's not a permanent position, but it would be 6 concerts over the summer, decent pay and excellent exposure." He reached into his pocket and handed her a business card. "Call my office on Monday. My assistant will set up the details." Before she could properly thank him, they were interrupted by the governor's wife, who wanted to express her admiration for Lisa's performance. By the time that conversation ended, the symphony director had been pulled away to speak with someone else. Lisa stood alone for a moment, the business card clutched in her hand like a talisman. A real audition. A real opportunity. After so long believing that door had closed forever, Lisa? Mr. Phillips, the restaurant owner, approached with Diane at his side. "So could we speak with you for a moment?" She followed them to a quiet table, her mind still reeling from the symphony director's offer. "I've owned this restaurant for 15 years, Mr. Phillips began, and I've never been as surprised as I was tonight. Diane tells me you've been working here for 2 years? Lisa nodded. Yes, sir. And in all that time you never mentioned you could play like that? It never came up, Lisa said, aware of how inadequate the explanation sounded. Mr. Phillips shook his head in amazement. Well, it's certainly come up now. Half my guests are talking about you instead of the charity. He smiled to show this wasn't a complaint. I understand from what I've overheard that you might have some new opportunities coming your way. Possibly, Lisa admitted, thinking of the symphony director's card in her hand. I've been invited to audition for a summer position. Excellent. You clearly belong on a stage, not carrying plates. Mr. Phillips leaned forward. But until that becomes a full-time reality, I'd like to make you an offer. We've been thinking of adding regular live music to the restaurant. Something elegant, sophisticated. Based on the response tonight, I think you'd be perfect. Lisa blinked in surprise. You want me to play here? Regularly? 3 nights a week to start. We'd pay you properly as a performer, of course, more than you make as a server. You could keep some shifts serving if you want the extra income, but I'd rather have you at the piano. The offer was so unexpected that Lisa didn't know how to respond. After 3 years of struggling to keep her musical dreams alive while working jobs that had nothing to do with her training, suddenly, she had not one but 2 potential paths back to what she loved. I don't know what to say. Say yes, Diane suggested with a smile. We already know you can do both jobs, but I think you'll be happier playing that piano than carrying trays. Before Lisa could answer, there was a commotion near the entrance. People were holding up phones, taking pictures and videos. Lisa turned to see what was happening and froze. Walking through the door was Anton Reed, one of the most famous pianists in the country. He was supposed to have been at a concert in Chicago tonight. Lisa had read about it just last week. Yet here he was, striding into the Silver Spoon in a perfectly tailored tuxedo. The crowd parted as he made his way across the room. To Lisa's shock, he was heading straight for her table. Mr. Reed, Mr. Phillips stood to greet him. We weren't expecting you tonight. What an honor. I was in Chicago until this afternoon, Reed explained. But my former student is in the string quartet here tonight. She called me after the first set, insisting I needed to hear this remarkable waitress who stepped in at the last minute. His gaze settled on Lisa. I gather that would be you? Lisa could only nod, momentarily starstruck. Anton Reed had been her idol throughout music school. She had attended every one of his master classes when he had visited Westridge, though she had never been selected to play for him. I missed your performance, unfortunately, Reed continued, but my student sent me a recording of your Rachmaninoff. He pulled out his phone, showing a video that must have been taken by one of the quartet members. Quite extraordinary under the circumstances. How long did you have to prepare? About 24 hours, Lisa admitted. Reed's eyebrows shot up. Even more impressive, then. Tell me, why haven't I heard of you before? With your technique, you should be performing regularly. The question hung in the air, heavy with assumptions. Everyone was watching, waiting for her answer. How could she explain the complex reality of her life these past 3 years? The financial pressures, her mother's illness, the crushing weight of student debt that had forced her to set aside her dreams. Life took a different turn than I expected, she said simply. Something in Reed's expression softened as if he understood the weight behind those few words. Life has a way of doing that. He glanced around at the crowded restaurant, at the piano still waiting in the center of the room. Would you play something else? I'd like to hear you in person. The request sent a wave of whispers through the nearby guests. Play for Anton Reed, here and now? It was both thrilling and terrifying. I'd be honored, Lisa said, surprising herself with the steadiness in her voice. As she made her way to the piano, the room fell silent again. This time, however, the silence felt different, charged with expectation rather than polite attention. These people had already heard her play. Now they were listening with new ears. Their perception of her fundamentally changed. She sat at the bench considering what to play. For a moment, she was tempted to choose something technically impressive to show off for Reed and the other musical professionals in the room. But instead she decided on Schubert's Impromptu in G-flat major, a piece that required sensitivity more than showmanship. As she began to play, Lisa was aware of Reed watching intently from nearby, his experienced ears catching every nuance, every choice she made in her interpretation. Yet strangely, she felt no fear. The music flowed through her fingers naturally, as if she were alone in her apartment rather than performing for one of the greatest pianists of his generation. When she finished, Reed was the first to applaud, a smile of genuine appreciation on his face. Others quickly joined in, the applause building to a wave that washed over Lisa, leaving her both humbled and exhilarated. Reed approached the piano, speaking quietly so only she could hear. "You have a rare gift for communicating emotion through your playing. That can't be taught." He took a business card from his pocket. "I'm giving a master class at the university next month. I'd like you to participate. And perhaps we can discuss your future plans." As Lisa accepted the card, she realized that something fundamental had shifted. In the space of a single evening, the people in this room had been forced to reconsider their assumptions. The woman they had seen only as someone who brought their food and cleared their plates had revealed herself to be an artist worthy of their full attention. And perhaps most importantly, she had reminded herself of who she truly was beneath the uniform and the practiced smile. Not just a waitress trying to make ends meet, but a musician with something meaningful to share with the world. 6 months passed like a whirlwind after that fateful night at the Silver Spoon. Lisa stood in the wings of Westridge Hall, the same stage where she had performed her graduate recital 3 years earlier. Back then, her future had seemed mapped out in clear, confident lines. A career as a concert pianist, teaching at a prestigious school, performing with orchestras around the country. Before life had intervened with its harsh realities of medical bills and student loans. Now she was back, but everything was different. Including her. "5 minutes, Miss Mitchell," the stage manager whispered, checking something off on his clipboard. Lisa nodded, smoothing down the front of her dark blue concert dress, one she had purchased herself, not borrowed. No safety pins tonight. The dress was simple but elegant, like the program she had chosen for her first solo recital. A journey from Bach to Debussy, showcasing both technical skill and emotional depth. From her position backstage, she could hear the murmur of the audience as they settled into their seats. The hall was sold out, something that still amazed her. 6 months ago, she had been invisible to most of these people. Now they had paid to hear her play. "You ready for this?" Richard Wilson, the symphony director who had first offered her an audition, appeared at her side. In the months since the charity gala, he had become a mentor and friend, guiding her re-entry into the music world with practical advice and genuine support. "As ready as I'll ever be," Lisa replied, flexing her fingers, a habit she couldn't break. "The hall looks good," Richard said. "Full house. And I spotted Anton Reed in the 3rd row." Lisa felt a flutter of nerves. After attending Reed's master class as a participant, she had begun taking occasional private lessons with him, sessions that pushed her to new levels of artistry and expression. His presence tonight was both encouraging and intimidating. "I saw Thomas Grant too," Richard continued, "and several critics. Word has gotten around about your story. People are curious, that was an understatement." The video Tina had taken of Lisa's performance at the gala had somehow found its way online, where it had quickly gone viral. Waitress stuns luxury event with incredible piano performance. The clickbait title had been just sensational enough to attract millions of views. The comments had ranged from supportive to skeptical. Some viewers insisted it must have been staged. Others shared similar stories of talented people working jobs far below their abilities due to economic pressures. A few music professionals had analyzed her technique in detailed breakdowns, generally with approval. The overnight internet fame had been strange and unexpected, a modern twist to her journey that her professors at the conservatory could never have prepared her for. But it had also created opportunities, opening doors that might otherwise have remained closed. "Just play like you did at the Silver Spoon," Richard advised. "Forget about the critics, forget about the expectations. Just tell your story through the music." Lisa smiled gratefully. "I will." As Richard left to find his seat, Lisa closed her eyes and took a deep breath. In her mind, she traced the path that had brought her here, from the lowest point of her struggle to this moment of possibility. After the charity gala, everything had happened so quickly. Mr. Phillips had made good on his offer, installing Lisa as the regular pianist at the Silver Spoon 3 nights a week. The income from those performances, combined with her audition success for the summer concert series with the symphony, had allowed her to scale back her waitressing hours significantly. For the first time in years, she had been able to focus primarily on music again. The hours previously spent serving tables and dealing with difficult customers had been redirected to practice and preparation. Her skills, which had somehow survived 3 years of limited resources, began to flourish again with proper time and attention. The viral video had brought inquiries from venues across the city, then from neighboring states, and eventually from a small but respected recording company specializing in classical music. Through it all, Lisa had tried to maintain perspective, to remember the lessons learned during her years of struggle, humility, perseverance, and gratitude for every opportunity. 2 minutes, the stage manager announced, breaking into her thoughts. Lisa opened her eyes and rolled her shoulders to release the tension. Through a small gap in the curtains, she could see the first few rows of the audience. There were familiar faces among them. Raj had closed the restaurant kitchen early to attend with several other staff members. Diane sat near the back, looking uncomfortable in formal attire but determined to support her former employee. In the front row sat Lisa's mother, finally recovered from the illness that had derailed Lisa's career in the first place. Beside her was Carol, the neighbor who had loaned Lisa the dress for the gala, now proudly telling anyone who would listen that she had played a small but crucial role in the Waitress pianist's story. Most surprisingly, in the center of the fourth row sat an elderly couple Lisa had served dozens of times at the Silver Spoon, regular customers who had never spoken to her beyond placing their orders. They had been among the first to purchase tickets when her recital was announced, sending her a note that simply read, "We always knew there was something special about you." Had they really? Or was that just something people say after the fact when someone's hidden talents are finally revealed? Lisa wasn't sure it mattered. What mattered was that she was here now, about to step onto the stage not as a surprise replacement or an amusing novelty, but as herself, a serious musician worthy of being heard. "It's time, Miss Mitchell," the stage manager said, gesturing toward the stage. Lisa nodded and moved toward the curtain. As she stepped into the light, the applause washed over her. Polite at first, then building as recognition spread through the audience. This was the Waitress pianist from the viral video. This was the woman whose story had captured their imagination. She crossed to the gleaming concert grand and took her seat, adjusting the bench with practiced precision. The hall fell silent, every eye fixed on her, every ear ready to receive what she had to offer. In that moment of perfect quiet, Lisa thought about the digital keyboard in her tiny apartment, the one she had practiced on with the volume turned low for 3 long years, keeping her dream alive one note at a time when no one was listening. She thought about the safety-pinned borrowed dress in the restaurant, piano, and the first shocked faces of the charity gala, guests. Then she placed her hands on the keys and began to play. The Bach prelude flowed from her fingers with confidence and clarity, each note precisely weighted, each phrase thoughtfully shaped. This wasn't just muscle memory or technical skill at work. This was communication in its purest form, a sharing of something essential and true. As she moved through her program, Lisa felt herself settling deeper into the experience, the initial nervousness giving way to complete immersion in the music. The audience faded from her awareness, not because she had forgotten them, but because she was so fully engaged in the conversation between herself, the piano, and the composers whose work she was interpreting. By the time she reached the Debussy that closed the first half of her program, Lisa was playing with a freedom and expressiveness that surprised even her. The rippling arpeggios of Reflets dans l'eau seemed to create actual reflections in the air, shimmering with light and movement. When she finished the piece and the hall erupted in applause, Lisa felt a